Yeah,
I
the
should have
home
gone
on the
on the
landline.
stream.
Well, it crashed when I did that a second ago. Okay, it's working this time.
And look, just so you know, I'm not bullshitting. God knows. Here's the Sony, the WH700s, WHXB 700s. That's a 3D printed outer casing so that I can put larger ear cups on it.
That is kind of cool, though. I won't lie. I guess I need to turn this up, don't I?
And these were some of the first Bluetooth headphones with a USB-C connection on them. I mean, like all of them have it now, but this was one of the first ones. And like a 24-hour battery life.
All right, let's fix this MP3.
So yeah, I might be a bit of a headphone nerd. And I sent Moss in the package that I just sent him. I sent him some closed back Marshalls. They're actually, I think they're made for like guitar amps, but really crisp, really clean.
Are they
smaller
monitors
ear
or are they
cups?
headphones?
They're headphones.
Oh, okay.
But they're smaller ear cups, so they're not, something that I really like. But I do love the sound in them, and I think he's going to be a little confused at first because you can hook it up on either side. You do not have to hook it up on both sides. You just hook it up on one side, but it's got the hole for it on both sides.
Okay.
And I sent him a cable for it too, and that was a high quality cable that I sent him. I'm gonna miss that cable more than I'm gonna miss the headphones. So that cable was complete overkill for that, but I didn't want to send him a shorter cable because then he would have complained about the shorter cable, and it would have been an issue.
Well, I got told an hour ago that I have dinner at my in-laws tonight, so yay.
Oh, that's messed up, man. That's you got to be told that at least a week in advance. At least a week in advance.
I don't have to worry about that anymore, and neither does my wife.
Yeah.
Well, I do. It's okay. My birth mother is still alive, but that.
Yeah, you don't tell me the day of I have to go deal with the in-laws. I got to prepare mentally.
Yeah, you got to get drunk and shit like that. And that takes time out of your day too.
Well, I will say that I've had more to drink in the last 2 weeks than I've had in the last couple of years.
So my daughter comes home from trick-or-treating. She's pulling candy out of her bag. She pulls this out. I'm like, who the hell gave you Fireball? She's like, no. It was because Mama was with me. There were neighbors that were giving out to the parents. They're giving out little liquor bottles. I'm like, really?
That's badass. Actually,
that's the 7-Eleven Fireball, though.
So she got the what is it? The something squirrel peanut butter whiskey, and then
Fireball. Blind Squirrel.
Blind Squirrel. I'm like,
oh dude,
my God.
I like that.
Mail me the Blind Squirrel. No.
Yeah, you like that?
Blind Squirrel. It's peanut butter flavored whiskey.
I haven't tried it.
Screwballs, peanut butter flavored whiskey. You can get that at the grocery store. It's pretty good.
I had a little bit of the Fireball because I used to actually, just to be an idiot, when you're out, you're already drunk and you're just like, hey, let's do a shot of something. Fireball, because I want to taste that for the next 3 days.
Right.
It's either that or Jaeger, right?
You were on the podcast last night, Eric. Did you hear, my drinking escapades over the last couple of days?
I think I came on after you talked about it, maybe.
Well, anyways, me and JoJo were out trick-or-treating. And, he was trick-or-treating. I was acting as security, protecting the world from him. and he knew about this one house where they always have like a big party out in their front yard, and there's stuff for adults there and all that jazz. So we went over there, and we'd been walking around for a couple of hours, so we wanted something cool to drink. I went and grabbed lemonade. He grabbed what he thought was cider, and yes, it was cider. But he took a drink and he's like, "Dad, try this. Tell me if this tastes funny." And I took one drink and I hand him my lemonade and this is mine. That's yours. and yeah, it was a one of the red plastic cups full of cider. So yeah, I was feeling nice by the time I got home.
I actually like cider. That was not something I ever drank when I was younger, but stuff like shandies and cider and like some of those sort of thing. I don't know. It depends on the weather. Even things like a Bud Light Lime or something.
I like that stuff.
It's not something I want to drink every day, but
cider, I love it, but it shoots my blood sugar up. So.
Oh yeah, it's full of sugar, no doubt.
It's bad.
And then like the week before, I went to a party, costume party. And they had this game where, they had the little liquor bottles like the Fireball one there. And they were covered with a napkin, like a ghost was drawn on it or whatever. And you're supposed to pop the top and leave the napkin on so you don't know what you're drinking and then pound it. And it tasted like Robitussin. But it was wild berry vodka.
Oof.
Well.
But yeah. Reminded me of my youth and Robitussin.
Oh, yeah. I had a roommate at college. That was his thing, was to doing Robitussin. And just be like, you wouldn't see him for 2 days straight. And you're like, oh, I know what he's doing.
Or,
oh, the recklessness of youth.
Kool-Aid and rubbing alcohol.
What?
Yeah.
You know when you walk into the middle of a conversation, you're like,
right?
What are people talking about?
You just don't like your guts at all, do you?
I didn't do it, but I had a friend that I went over to his house, and he was at a let's say a low point in his life, and there was bottles of rubbing alcohol and
Kool-Aid.
They
make it that way on purpose.
Yeah, I had an uncle that basically drank himself to death, and when the rest of the family was trying to keep him away, he would, drink things like cologne and rubbing alcohol.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah, he was that bad. He was that far down the rabbit hole. And I had another friend that was an idiot and drank gasoline.
Wow. I bet that
I just love the way that you said that. I had a friend. He was an idiot.
Well, that's an idiot thing
to do. What else
do
you call that?
Yeah, no. I agree entirely. In fact, I'm thinking that would fit for a lot of my friends, actually.
I'm just wondering, like, I subscribe to a lot of these TikToks of nurses and doctors that get the weird shit in the ER. Like, what kind of shit do people come in there fucked up on like that?
Stories I can tell, my friend. I can go on.
What's the worst thing somebody has drank? I mean, not trying to kill themselves, but just trying to get drunk. What is, like, the worst thing you've seen somebody ingest?
Probably disinfectant. So like the hand
sanitizer.
Yeah.
How did they choke that down?
Don't ask me, mate. But they did.
It's a process to get to that point,
Yeah. There was one guy who used to raid our. So, we have our sharps bins, where we put all our needles and whatever. And he would, come to the hospital at night or whatever, find where the sharps bins were and would, break them open to see if he could still get hold of some drugs. And because the drugs would be labeled normally. And so it became practice that we should empty our syringe before we putting it in the bin. Anyway, he would keep on coming into theater or into whatever. And somebody asked him, of all the things that you've tried, what was one that gave you the biggest high? Because he'd had ketamine and he'd had morphine and he'd had this, that, and the other that he'd got from these syringes. And he said, there was this one drug, which I don't know what it is, but it gave me the best high. It's Marcaine. Now, Marcaine is a local anesthetic. Don't ask me why. How the guy's still alive, I don't know, because you get before you get any psychological effects, your heart normally stops. So how he survived that, I don't know.
God.
But
conditioning. You know,
Well, yeah,
I swear some
yeah.
of those people are able. Well, and they say that's how a lot of people overdose. Is they'll have such a high tolerance, and then they'll quit for some amount of time, and then they come back and they think they can do the same amount they
Oh yeah,
used
yeah,
to.
yeah,
And they can't.
100%. That's very, very true. I mean, I used to we used to have a patient who he was taking lots of benzodiazepines. He was on a ridiculous amount by the time he was on like literally 100 times more than what you would normally give a patient. 2 milligrams is what you would normally give. This guy was taking 200 milligrams a day and working with it. Yeah.
Just so used to it. Yeah.
He was so used to it. Anyway, he ended up getting off it and things like that. And I think we sent him to
How do you
therapy.
get off that?
So he had to spend, I think, 6 weeks in hospital getting titrated down to, because it gives you withdrawal if you stop it abruptly, like opioid withdrawal, that kind of thing. So it took, actually, he was in hospital for 6 weeks, but I think the withdrawal bit was only 4 weeks.
Mm.
Yeah, the other 2 weeks, I don't know why he was still in hospital for. But anyway, and he then, went back out into the community or whatever, and then, didn't hear head nor tail of him, and then heard like about 2 years later or something, 3 years later, came in with a fall or something like that, and he'd basically relapsed. He'd had an addiction to this stuff, and so he'd basically relapsed, and he would taken literally like a tenth of what he was on before, and it had completely, he didn't know where he was going. He was big chunks of memory just out of the window. He has no idea,
Wow.
and it was just like, you're right, the body and the mind get really desensitized to this stuff, but then they get resensitized when you're off it for a while. And yeah, you're right, a lot of, so there was that rapper, Juice WRLD, the one who died of an overdose. Okay, so he's a rapper that the kids like. Anyway, he died of an accidental overdose when he was on a plane, and it had been tipped off that he had more oxycodone, I think Oxycontin, and other morphines and whatever with him. And so in order not to get caught, he just swallowed the lot of them. Yeah. And that ended up giving him a cardiac arrest, and he died. So it's like, yeah, it's a thing, innit? Accidental overdose. People think that they can take more than they can.
Well,
because they have been taking more than they should, and so you get that false sense of security, as it were.
Well, and I this is only tangentially related, but I've been telling my daughter, because she's sort of at that age where, I mean, hey, unfortunately, 12 and 13-year-olds, they're going to start being in situations where people may offer them things. And I just said, look, I know there's a lot of fear mongering around, and there always has been around, like, oh, E will kill you. And like, there's been a lot of like misinformation where they overblow things. But honestly, fentanyl is such a problem right now. And like literally people dropping dead because, they take one pill that they don't know what it is. And they have either a sensitivity to it, or it's just too high of a dose. And I'm like, it's a really dumb way for a young person to die. And I mean,
there's a lot of I mean, we had I think there was a couple of deaths of people who were getting these meds off the internet, that they couldn't get, and they were being sold as being, official black market, obviously, but
right.
but there was actually strips of drugs that they were getting in packs and stuff like that, so they thought it was normal stuff. And then there was 1 or 2 deaths, and it turned out that it was actually barbiturates in them instead, because they were fake. And it's just,
well, so that situation, I feel bad, because it really does, you see a lot of this medical tourism going to Mexico, going to Canada, because the prescription drug medication is so much less expensive. And unfortunately, that there are people who will prey on that. And, and honestly, a lot of times it isn't even necessarily the person selling it to you. It's where they got it from, and they don't know those people, or they can't trust it. If you don't have that chain of custody to understand where something came from and how it got to you, it's easy for someone to abuse that.
Mexico gets a bad rap on that shit. No, it was fine.
I know they do,
so
because most people have a great experience coming to Mexico and getting
as long as you're going to an actual pharmacy,
right,
and they're all over the border because the medical trade is there.
Right.
Then you're perfectly fine. You're picking up the exact same stuff you would be buying in America, purchased from the exact same places that make the stuff. I mean,
Right.
the exact same distributors are giving it to them as the companies in America, or the U.S., but you're paying like a fifth of the price or less.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I watched...
As somebody that used to live on the border and have family members with some rather severe medical conditions, in-laws, of course, but that constantly crossed the border and got stuff.
Right. Or go for medical treatments, dialysis and other stuff that's just less expensive to get that stuff. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, a lot of that sort of.
We're getting a lot of that. People going over to Turkey and doing that. We're getting a lot of that at the minute.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's just so expensive, and it's hard to fault people for. You look at the value, and like Joe's saying, I mean, if it's the same thing and you feel relatively safe, then...
Hell, I used to get my glasses there. My wife had some dental work done there in Mexico.
Yeah,
and
dental's a big one. Yeah, I've heard that too. Yeah.
Even after insurance, the glasses were still cheaper for me to go to Mexico and buy it without insurance at the time, because I had really crappy insurance when it came to vision. But yeah.
Yep. Well, anyway, I just it's hard to tell a young person, because when you came in talking about drinking, rubbing alcohol and God knows what else, but I mean it's when you're young, you do stupid things because you just think you're invincible, and there's a difference between getting sick and overdoing something and throwing up, and there is dying, you know what I mean? So
I've lived with a lot of alcoholics, and I can see the look on their frickin' faces when they're jonesing for that next buzz, and it's bad.
Well,
I've
never been through it, but from what I understand, withdrawal is awful. Very, very painful, and not just physically but psychologically anguish.
Well, I mean, because the physical dependence part of it is bad. I'm not gonna lie, and people go through a lot of difficulty. The worst ones, I think, is probably opioids. Probably the worst withdrawal. But and it can take a long time. It can take many months of reducing dosages and this type of stuff. The psychological need of what made you get into that situation where you were maybe in so much pain, as in psychological pain, that you had to numb it with alcohol or opioids or whatever it might be. That's the real hard one, getting, and that's how people, and that's why, because I mean, I've got to be honest, when I first read about it and learned about it, the idea that addiction was a disease, I was a bit like, is it really? It really kind of is, it behaves like a disease. It's a chronic relapsing problem. People have to work at it to keep themselves clean and sober, and so yes, you're right. The getting off, in the acute stage is horrible, but it's the staying off which is the real work that people have to do.
Yeah, if it was just physical, then all the people who goes through rehab and detox would be able to walk out and then not have the same sort of temptations. But you're right. I mean, if you don't treat the underlying mental illness, basically, because it's self-medication in most cases, right? I mean, someone's hurting in some way, and
and then you start finding out all the kind of social things that are going on in people's lives, and you kind of go, what? It's not a surprise you want to try and numb some of it.
Well, what amazes me, so when I left home and I grew up in a small town in Western Pennsylvania, which had lost its industry. So most of the good jobs were gone. So in terms of like economic prosperity, like it just wasn't possible to be there and have, and to prosper basically. And so you had a lot of sort of, depression around that and just negativity. And then really the supply of what's available for self-medication, I think, is a big deal because when I left, people were doing the normal stuff, right? I mean, cocaine, marijuana, methamphetamine, maybe that kind of stuff. But then like 10 years after I left, I kept hearing my friends talk about people overdosing on like heroin. And I'm like, heroin? Like I never once in my entire life saw someone do heroin when I lived there. Like, what are you talking about? They're like, oh, yeah, it's everywhere. I'm like, how the hell is it everywhere? Like, where's it coming from? And apparently these drug dealers just find territories to come into and, get people going. And I just blew my mind.
Better than crocodile.
I don't know. I can't
don't
imagine.
Look up crocodile. I'm telling you right now, do not do a search for crocodile.
Is it one of your terrible movies? Because it sounds like
no, it's an actual drug that is popular amongst people that can't get a hold of heroin anymore.
Oh,
it's cheaper, and it will basically turn you into a living zombie.
Great. Actually, I think I may have heard of that, but not that name.
That's the name of it.
Anyway, I think that a lot of it just has to do with what's available, and
your flesh will rot.
Ew, that sounds like fun. Well, I don't know. So yeah, I actually had a childhood friend that we were really close when we were younger, and kind of. I left when I graduated, and yeah, he was almost 40 years old and overdosed on heroin. I'm like, him of all people, like really? I just could never see him doing something like that, but I don't know. I also couldn't imagine living my life in a small town like that in the conditions they do, because there's just really nothing there, in my opinion. I'm sure they'll disagree with me. And
well, no,
I know
I'm from small town Iowa for a large chunk of my younger life. I do understand it's like 350 people in the town.
Right. And exactly.
You go back to visit, and rampant alcoholism, rampant meth use. It's like, yeah, they work, people work making or the CNC facilities or whatever, factory work, hog work, whatever they can do during the day. And then the rest of the time, they're just numbing themselves by either getting so drunk that they can't stand every night and then driving home. Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Drunk driving is a state sport. Or they're getting high on meth so that they can forget about how much they're
my town didn't even have a police department for about 10 years, which I always thought was like, wow, let the the inmates running the asylum basically, like, and it's funny now because there is a police force, and like all of the alkies are upset about it because they can't drive home from the bars, and they actually like have this like network of communicating with each other where they're like, oh, the cop's sitting down here, or like it's like, you could just not drink.
As I said, this is my thing. You see, this is my point about how it is. There's a measure of insanity involved, which you think to yourself, no normal person would think like that, and then you think to yourself, and this is my point about that, it behaves like a disease because it doesn't make any rational sense to anyone. Least of all the person themselves. Afterwards, they will kind of look, can't believe I was so stupid, or I can't believe I did this.
Let me ask you about pub culture, because this is something I think as Americans we kind of don't quite like, the pub being sort of the central hub of the community, and the meeting house and that sort of thing.
So it's again something I'm not going to know anything about because I come from a community that doesn't drink.
Okay, good point.
Yeah, because Muslims don't drink, and so therefore.
Okay, so wait a minute. So okay, that's a good point. So if you, as someone who doesn't drink, in a society that values something like a pub, does that make you feel like you're left out in situations, or will you go to a pub and then just not drink?
But it does make you feel left out because people won't invite you.
They won't invite you.
Look,
Okay.
Yeah, and standing around a whole bunch of drunk people being their driver is not exactly fun for me either. You know what I mean?
Do you really?
Later on in my 20s, I really cut back on the drinking, like to the point where it basically didn't exist except on my birthday and New Year's. But I would still go to a lot of parties and hang out with my friends that were drinking. And like sometimes they'd even be at my house, and my kids noticed actually that I would have a beer in my hand, but I would have that same beer in my hand the whole night. And the only reason I was holding that beer and taking little sips off it every now and again is so that nobody would try and hand me another beer and get me drunk.
Harass you. Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
Why aren't you drinking? Blah blah blah. Like,
right.
You're right here.
Yeah. You know what? And I'll tell you too, there's no other activity like drinking that if you're not directly involved with it, but you have to be around those people, they are the most obnoxious people, even if they're your friends and they're people.
Oh yeah,
you love,
100%. It's just not
you
worth
still
it.
want to smack
bothered.
them. Yeah, just because it's only funny and it's only, enjoyable if you're taking part. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I mean, sometimes you don't get invited. If you do get invited, you go, you don't feel like you kind of thing. But that thing about it being part of the local community and the hub, that is true. And so I do feel a bit left out, that people will have.
Was there a shift though at some point? Because here's my gauge of this, and you're gonna laugh because this is totally stupid, but Time Team, all of the older episodes from like the late 80s, early 90s, like every episode at the end of the day, they'd all sit around either at a pub and just have drinks, right?
Yeah.
At some point in like the late 90s, early 2000s, I noticed that they stopped showing them doing that.
So that is true. That is true. Again, I'd say over the last 15 years, I would say that's true as well. Because the big thing being that the changing licensing and opening hours. So we used to have a very strict thing about no alcohol after 11 o'clock. So the pubs would close at 11, right? We did, nightclubs didn't serve alcohol until after 11.
Wow.
Right?
Okay.
Yeah. So this was something from the 80s. That was just part of the law. The law was, and in the late 90s, the laws changed. Things opened up. You started getting nightclubs. People, you can 24-hour drinking became a thing. As in, there was no limit on the time. Supermarkets started selling a lot more alcohol, and it was often a lot cheaper than what you'd get at the pub. The pub would normally be a family-run business, self-employed, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so the pub industry as a whole went into massive decline. They talk about they talk about like a pub closes every week, something like that, because people who want just a place to sit and chat, well, there's other places for them to sit and chat. And people who want to go get drunk, well, why would you go to a place which at 11 o'clock has to shut its doors?
Yeah, or you're paying more than you have to.
Yeah, or you're paying more than you have to. And so, it just, over the last, there's been stuff written about this quite a bit in the British press about, so it is something that, it has kind of died a death now, but in the 80s and 90s, definitely. And even now, once in a while, you'll get like, I remember going for my fellowship exams, and the classic thing to do is you do your fellowship exams, you then go over the road to the pub, kind of decompress, and then a little bit later you'd go back, pick up your results, and then go home. And I was kind of like, okay, well, you guys are all going to get completely drunk, really, because half of you think you failed, and I think I failed, but I'm not going to get drunk. So I just kind of stood around for a bit, with these semi-drunk people, and then walked back into the Royal College. And some of us had passed, and some of us hadn't passed, So, but it is still part of the culture. But that kind of regularity that people used to do, where it used to be the hub of your local community and stuff like that. I mean, it even came up in the last elections. People complaining, "Oh, look, it's the death of British culture. All these pubs are closing." Yeah, well, pubs are closing because people aren't going to them. It's not some kind of, again, it's that thing we were saying, there's not some massive culture war happening. It's just life has moved on.
Economics and everything else, yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe it's for the best that those people who were going to have those conversations at a pub or a bar or maybe at a coffee shop now or something like that. I don't know. Yeah. Because I would see the loss of that being more so the social aspect than the act of drinking. I mean, even though they sort of went hand in hand, the idea that you had this place where, you know, your friends and family and also I think that
I want to point something out to you, Eric, just real quick.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cheers.
Yeah.
The TV show Cheers.
Yeah.
Which would have been in the exact same time frame that you're talking about, late 80s, early 90s. And it was all about a bar and people hanging out there. So we had that here too.
No, we did, but I don't think that so listen, I grew up, my small town is all about clubs, right? And it would be the Polish club, the Italian club, the Lithuanian club, the independent club. Like there were a dozen different, you know, the VFW, and every one of them is a bar and it is a social club as well. And so, no, I get that system. I mean, and it's still alive and well today. I just mean in terms of, but that's very much an adult thing. First of all, like I would go with my uncle, like if he was going to sign up, because you do this like sign the book thing and you can win money or whatever. But, and it's a way for them to sort of draw you in on a daily basis. So like if he was out running errands and just had to go in and sign the book, he'd get me like an orange soda and I'd play pinball or something while he had a drink, which, you know, again, small town living, you know, have a beer and go drive with your young family in the car, whatever. Different time, I guess. But
I mean, it's a classic thing that's done. You know, when I'm on people's 18th birthdays, for example, you know, you hear, "Oh, what did you do?" I took my son down for his first legal drink, because 18 is the drinking age in this country. You know, and so it does still have that a echo in the public consciousness, if you want to put it that way. But it's nothing. But it's not a part of life like it was before.
No, that town of 350 people that I was talking about growing up in, it had 2 bars. Like, you know what?
Woodrow Reserve?
Bourbon.
Or Woodford?
Woodford Reserve.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, see, that's
Is
Tennessee.
it Kentucky bourbon?
Kentucky, yeah. All bourbon is Kentucky bourbon.
Oh, that's right. I forgot.
Yeah.
Just like all champagne is from France.
Aldi caramel whiskey. Whiskey with natural flavors and caramel color added.
And that's a Tennessee whiskey, which means it's like a sour mash.
It can't be called bourbon, right?
Right. Correct. There's rules to these things.
I know, it's silly.
I just needed a little spicing up for my coffee.
Yeah, but that little town that I was talking about required 2 bars to service the amount of people that were drinking every day. Granted, it didn't have a grocery store and it only had the 1 gas station, but it had 2 bars.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. Well, that just shows you that people have vices. You know, they just... And maybe it's always been
not
that way.
It would be high fat foods or sugary foods, things
That's
like
what I
that.
mean. Like everybody,
You know.
whether you're drinking alcohol or you're eating the wrong foods, or, you know, there's something that we do.
I think the sin is in the excessiveness.
Which is why I picked weightlifting. It seemed the least destructive.
Well,
tell that to my shoulder.
True.
That's because you're doing it wrong.
You're not warming up,
Bill.
Like I don't. I always forget to warm up.
Got 40 minutes to get it all
Stretching.
done. Yeah, I stretch.
I never stretched.
I
was always.
You don't stretch before, you stretch after. Stretching before will lead to more injuries. Warming up should be some type of active motion.
Yeah, I know. Well, I normally cycle for 5 minutes as just a way of getting things going.
When I was running, if I didn't stretch before I ran, it was going to be a bad day. So I miss that. I actually do. It beat the hell out of me. Like I had all kinds of problems from running, but I loved it when I was healthy enough to do it.
I have a lot of problems from running. I never loved it, but I was in a unit that was attached to an airborne unit. So they decided we needed to run 6 miles a day, whether it was good for us or not.
Oh, did they talk shit to you? Come on,
Everybody
leg.
talks shit to everybody.
Come on, leg. Let's go. They call everybody that's not airborne leg. And if you was unfortunate enough to be stationed somewhere where everybody was airborne except you, or at least that's the way it felt, airborne means you jump out of airplanes.
We were attached to an airborne unit, but all of Patriot was at Fort Bliss at the time. Now they've moved out everywhere else, but at the time they were still at Fort Bliss. And so, yes, we were attached, but we really didn't see a lot of the airborne guys, so we didn't get a lot of the whole leg thing until we were deployed.
So you're airborne when you're in the airplane. If you jump out, you're only airborne for a little bit longer, and then technically, never mind. I'm just being a smartass.
And then you're becoming.
Then you're not airborne anymore. That's
it's
right.
not like they're going to drop 10-ton trucks out of a plane.
No, that would be crazy.
Not Patriot.
Actually,
they're not going to drop Patriot missiles out of a plane.
No, they shoot them out at. Well, no, they don't do that either.
So I always thought the logistics of doing those drops, like airdrops, where you're doing crates and vehicles and stuff, like that must actually be pretty cool to do that, to be like the technician that sets that stuff up. And
one of those things we enjoyed when we weren't doing it.
Your volume is way down, Bill.
Is it?
Compared to everybody else.
Oh, it doesn't sound like it. You sound quiet too. Both of you sound quiet to me.
You sound quiet to me, actually, Joe.
Okay.
I was saying that airborne.
Well, what's interesting on YouTube, you guys sound the same. Anyway, go ahead.
Well, you're getting a different concept on the YouTube because the way I make this work is because you're getting the clear audio path from my microphone out OBS Studio, and then you guys are something separate.
Discord.
Yeah,
we're getting the Discord stuff. Yeah. Anyway, so you were saying about airborne. Go ahead.
It's one of those things that we enjoyed when we weren't doing it, but then we pretended to enjoy it when we were doing it. There was some guys that it just seemed.
Did you jump out of a plane?
Oh yeah.
Well, that's why your knees are all messed up.
Oh, my knees are fine.
Okay.
I went and had so I don't know if I told you so. I've had both hips replaced. Because of avascular necrosis. If you take prednisone or a corticosteroid long enough, they don't know exactly why, but basically it causes bone death. And
it does.
Your large bones, like your femur and stuff, the sockets will degrade. Basically, the ball will collapse, and so that's what happened on my hips, and it was really painful. And then they did the replacements and a total replacement, right? So my shoulder's doing the same thing now, and I went and I met with them, and it was the coolest thing where if your rotator cuff is still good, if you're younger, they can put in just a total replacement where it's the same way. The ball's on the top of the humeral head and then it goes into the socket. If you're older like I am and your rotator cuff is probably marginal, they can do a reverse total replacement where they put the ball on on where the socket should have been, and then the humeral head is actually the socket. It's so crazy. I'm like, that is so common. Smart.
It's quite common.
Yeah,
I've done loads of those. Loads.
And I was like, so what's my range of motion like after? He's like, it's perfect. He's like, you'll love it.
Yeah, it's normal. It's normal.
Yeah.
So so
now I'm like, yeah.
Well, I was just gonna ask, what's the benefit of going that direction instead of just the way it was done?
So if you need so your rotator cuff is kind of like when you're young, it's sort of thick and leathery, and it's kind of what rides, lets that bone sort of ride properly. But everyone, as they get older, the rotator cuff just naturally thins out, and eventually depending on how much abuse you've put on your body, it will be either thin or basically non-existent. So you'll get a tear, or you'll have like problems with it. And basically, if you already have a problem with your rotator cuff, and there's no point in getting a normal total replacement because it relies on that being healthy. The advantage of doing the reverse is by having the ball be on the inside and the socket on the outside, it completely negates the need for a rotator cuff in the first place. So like physiologically, it just blanks, it removes the
Yeah, the other muscle.
Yeah,
the other muscles that you have will take over.
So I can stop.
Right. And so basically,
mine
he's
out.
saying,
That's an injury that I've had over and over in my adult life.
Well, what's amazing about total replacement? What's amazing about a total replacement is just that. Like, it just completely fixes the whole thing. Instead of, like, my dad had like a couple surgeries where they were just trying to either fix the rotator cuff or certain pieces, and like if they don't do it exactly perfectly, like they can do more damage than good.
Yeah.
And then once they do that, you can't then keep getting the same type of surgeries.
Okay.
And then you basically,
Yes. So do you want to hear something else that's a bit slightly mind blowing? You can do this. You can do this awake. You can do it.
I'll pass.
You can do it. I know. You can. I'm just saying. We have done it on. Say, if you've got elderly patients who've got lots of other medical problems, you can.
They can't do anesthesia.
You can, and I have done it. Found the nerves that come to that part of your shoulder. Using ultrasound, inject local anesthetic around that, let it cook for about 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and then they can do and as long as the operation is likely to be uncomplicated and last less than an hour, they can do that with a patient sat up there just talking to you.
You can replace a shoulder in an hour.
Yeah.
40 minutes. He told me 40 minutes for a total for me.
Wow.
Yep. I mean, I was all told I'll go to an outpatient surgery center. So my hips were 7 hours. I would go in at 6 a.m. You talk to the anesthesiologist, you talk to the surgeon, the nurse preps you. They get you, and that's a couple hours, 2-3 hours of just sort of prep work and, getting paperwork done and all of that. But the actual surgery, I think was, for each hip was something like 45 minutes at the most. Yeah. And that's if there's any complications, it's very, it's mind blowing how fast they do it, really.
Yeah. I mean, the quickest surgeon I had worked with could do a knee replacement in half an hour. Like, I hadn't finished writing my notes of the anesthesia that I've given, and he'd be like, okay, we're done now, next patient. And I'd be like, whoa, hold on, give me a minute to sit down.
You're going to spend more time than that.
Similarly, so when people break their hips when they're elderly, what they call the fractured neck of femur, we normally do you can depending on what the bone's like, you either do a nailing, you put a dynamic hip screw in, or you do a hemiarthroplasty, which is basically a fancy way of saying doing half a hip replacement. You're just doing just the ball part of it, not the socket, because the socket is fine, the ball is broken, so you just replace that bit.
Gotcha.
I knew a surgeon who could do that operation skin to skin, 16 minutes.
Wow. But I guess it's an advantage that if you're not keeping someone open longer than they need to be, you're reducing the risk of infection. And
100%. 100%. It's so there is a well-known reaction that your body does in response to surgery. The surgical insult, as we call it, right? There is a set of responses that your body will do, because basically what's happening when you're doing surgery is that you're giving somebody a major trauma in a controlled manner, in a way to try and fix them. And so your body behaves like that. So if you can keep that period as minimum as possible, with still obviously doing it safely and doing it properly and whatever.
Not rushing, right?
Yeah, not rushing. But if you can minimize that time, then that's going to have an effect. I was always taught that, for example, if an operation goes past 4 hours, right, then that patient almost by definition needs to go to intensive care because they've been under for that long. It's something's going to happen. I had a child who we were doing a hip reconstruction on. COVID's got a lot to answer for, yeah? One of the things was because there was so few face-to-face things happening when it came to checkups, right? Mm-hmm. A lot of children, at least in my area anyway, who were being born with like hip problems weren't being picked up. And they were getting picked up when they were 2-3 years old.
made it harder to deal with at that point.
Yeah,
right?
and now instead of maybe putting them in a plaster or something like that, you're having to do a full-on hip reconstruction on a 2-year-old.
Yeah.
So I ended up doing one a couple of months ago, and it went on for a while, and then finished. It took about 4 and a bit hours. Finished, sent the patient to the ward. We did the rest of the cases. I went home, and then I kind of texted the surgeon. I said, "Have you heard anything about the 2-year-old? How's she doing?" He was like, "Yeah, everything's fine." Okay, fine. In the morning, I get a text from the surgeon saying, "So, child was transferred to the high dependency unit." What? What happened? So I came. I was obviously coming in anyway to do another set of cases, but I went to see, and it turns out that yes, being asleep for 4 hours is not good for you, especially if you are brewing a chest infection that the mother didn't tell you about.
Oh, come on.
So, I mean, in fairness to the mother, it was like she just had a bit of a cough. She didn't have a temperature or anything like that. So I didn't think much of it. Okay, fine, but that's fine thinking not much of it when your kid's running around. But when I've given them an anesthetic and they've been under for 4 hours, having had major hip surgery, is it a surprise that they might develop a pneumonia? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Kid was fine in the end. But it was
yeah, but that takes something out of you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, hey, sorry to switch topics on you. Bill, you had mentioned that you thought Audacity 3.7 was something interesting, but we stopped you from talking about it on OTC.
Well, it's performing all the problems I had with it are fixed now, basically. And it was
what does that mean?
I was getting some above average drifting in time, which I've got a theory about that now.
Oh, right. I forgot about that. Yeah. Okay.
Horizontal scroll bar. There at the end, it was taking of course, I've been using the flat pack because it's fine. It was taking long enough to start up that it was making Cinnamon throw up the hey, this is taking too long to start. Do you want to wait or close it? And then, like, almost a half a second later, it would start up. And they fixed all that stuff. And they've actually, I don't know, it seems to work way better now. They say, they claim that they have fixed the FFmpeg problem with the app image because there was at least on Mint and Arch. In fact, they made a point to say that it was on those two distributions, Mint and Arch. It was not able to
FFmpeg.
Not able to link to FFmpeg, and
gotcha.
I downloaded the app image and I was still having the problem. But then when I got on the forum, everybody else said it was working fine. So I think maybe I need to delete all the configs. I think I'm gonna do a fresh install in a virtual machine.
I don't know if they did something specific, but I've noticed, and this was before 3.7 as well. So yeah, I'm still on 3.6.4, the one I'm looking at right now. They did something to the UI in terms of like the spacing, and they cleaned up some of the bottom row, like all of that stuff, the tempo and snapping and selection. All of that used to be like a huge jumble, and the same thing kind of at the top. Some of these buttons used to just be higgledy-piggledy, like all over the place.
Right.
And now it seems like they've done something to sort of clean that
cleaner.
Up. Yeah.
I'm not crazy with the way the waveform looks now. The waveform is not as sharp as it was before, but I think that's probably something I can fix.
Gotcha.
I think that's something you can configure, actually. But yeah, they've done some UI cleanup, and they claim that it is in preparation for the much anticipated 4.0 release. Which, if there's any development, if there's any 4.0 development going on, it must be somewhere besides GitHub, because it last month was the last time I looked, and the latest thing on GitHub was the 3.7 development.
Have they said what's supposed to be in what the roadmap is for
you're getting
4.0 release?
Like, no, nothing usable in terms of information. But you are seeing, like, whoever is handling the Audacity Facebook account is still posting pictures of that 4.0 mock-up user interface where it's darker and there's much more modern looking controls, and it's laid out a lot more.
I haven't seen it. I'll go look.
Yeah, it's out there, but like I said, if the development's going on, it must be somewhere besides GitHub, because I can't find anything anywhere. They're still in the latest branch. The last time I looked was a 3.7. But everybody except the Audacity developers seem to be talking about it like it's going to happen. So, I mean, obviously it's going to happen eventually. But I mean, where they're at right now, I'm happy with it.
From a functional standpoint,
yeah, from a functional standpoint, I can use it. It's at least on par with the Windows version. The Flatpak is, anyway. I'm not crazy about the fact that the Flatpak is unverified, but that really doesn't make a huge difference to me. But I imagine
the thing I like about the Flatpak is that it includes a lot of the codecs. That's kind of why I like it.
It includes a copious amount of codecs and add-ons and plugins, and I've had to disable some of them just so that I can find the ones that I put in there myself a little bit easier. Because the compressed dynamics one and the de-esser, they kind of get buried in the rest of them if you don't have a way. And I figured out how to get into the file itself for the plugin and change a couple things, and you can change the way it gets organized by adding a couple of lines.
That sounds like an innards right there.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure everybody's fascinated with Audacity.
I am.
Nyquist.
I am. You seem to be. That's enough for me.
Interestingly, Tenacity is doing away with Nyquist plugins altogether, so that'll be interesting to see where they go with that.
There is a bit of a there's a visual difference here in 3.7. It's subtle, but it's different.
So is this available in all the different versions, or is it just the Flatpak, or is it just the Deb? Because I'm just looking at what Audacity version I have.
There's no Deb, but the Flatpak and the app image are 3.7. Make sure you get the right one, because the download screen has an app image for 20.04 and then another one for 22.04. So make sure you get the one for 22.04.
Okay, so the one that's in on Mint normally is the Deb, isn't it? Okay.
Yeah,
so
that's going to be way behind.
Yeah, it's 3.4.
Yeah.
Let's get.
Oh no! Interestingly, it seems like it's doing so that Craig project that I downloaded. The first time I ran it, and this was in the previous version, it took 3 minutes to open, and it's doing it now, and it just did it's doing each OGG file individually, spooling it in, and it did mine.
I can't. They only have app images. There's no Flatpak.
No, you got to go.
You got to go to just FlatHub.
FlatHub.
Oh, okay, fine.
Or your software manager, and make sure you enable the unverified Flatpaks so that you can get it.
So it's taking roughly.
That's why it's not coming up. Yeah.
Yeah. So each one of the tracks is taking roughly 25 seconds, which is probably.
It's interesting
3-4 times faster.
It's like they've created it is an Audacity project, but
Almost like a pointer or something.
It's like a script, basically, to open Audacity and then import these files. Because if you download it in FLAC format, you get the exact same thing. You just have to open Audacity and import them yourself. And it's pretty much the exact same. I've compared them, and it's pretty much the exact same quality.
I'll tell you what, though. This looks, to me, the new dark theme is very pretty compared to what it used to be. The UI is very clean. I'm on GNOME, and I think that might be part of just, the GTK, the way it's rendering. I don't know, but I mean, this looks pretty damn good compared to what it used to. So, I mean, I really can't complain. And, so visually, I mean, it's a lot better. And then I agree with you. I mean, if there was some better way to use the effects other than this like nested list, you know what I mean? This nested menu structure. And I know there's a manager and stuff.
Give you the option to like create your own organization
or just
scheme,
favorites. Like give me a little like favorites section where I can just the three that I use all the time.
I think so many people use macros and things like, okay, I just tried the dark theme. I'd never tried that before. That actually
with the purple and stuff.
Yeah.
They're
getting there.
Yeah, I think it looks good. Yeah, I think it looks pretty good.
Was you able to get it, Majid?
Functionally.
Majid?
Yeah, sorry?
Was you able to get it?
Yeah, I've just got it now. I'm just going to launch it now. It's just installed. I think the reason I've not found it, incompatible plugins found.
Yeah,
it's okay. Just there's one it's going to find. You just say continue.
Okay, fine. Oh yeah, it does look quite nice, doesn't it?
It's faster. It just seems fast. It seems
it's way faster. That I'm telling you, that opening that project file was 5 times faster than it was, and I just did that last week. So I mean, I remember how long it took. So, yeah, that's good.
It's not often we get excited about Audacity.
Yeah.
I mean, look,
it's
Audacity
great,
is.
So next week they'll have it fucked.
Well, of course. No, I still contend that Audacity is one of those sort of darling open source projects that has always been there.
It needs to be taken seriously.
4 o'clock already. Good God.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to call it quits, kids.
Yeah, it's 8 o'clock here, so I'm gonna have to call it quits too as well.
Going.
Do we need a topic yet, or?
I thought we had one. Didn't we say last week we were
digital
do...
hygiene?
You didn't do that?
Yeah, they didn't do it, and they talked about distro hopping instead.
Oh yeah.
We wanted to have you guys on.
Anti-distro hopping.
Well, that's actually kind of cool because I do have some opinions about that. So, okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right. Anyway, have a good weekend. What's left of it, folks?
Yeah, you too, man.
We'll see you next time.